So the gateway to an academic career is the elusive PhD. In this video, I'm going to talk about 10 different things that you should consider before you do your dive into obtaining that highest of academic accolades. I'm James, and welcome to my YouTube channel. On this channel, we discuss absolutely everything to do with research. The first thing to think about is your personal motivation. Why do you want to do a PhD? Now, there are many reasons. Some of them are good and some of them are bad. I can think of some bad ones. You want to do a PhD because you want to be called doctor. Believe me, that gets old very quickly. But there are lots and lots of good reasons. And the very first thing I would say is ask yourself the question, why do you want to do a PhD? And then ask yourself why, and then ask yourself why again, until finally you get to the core of why you really are motivated to do this PhD. And if that's good enough, then continue to do it. But if it's not, that's something you need to consider as well. What are your research interests? That's a really key point. Sometimes it's very difficult to get into specific research programs, and if you end up doing a PhD that's close enough to your research interest but not exactly what you want to do, then it can make the journey very difficult. So, when you look at the research project, when you look at what you're actually going to do, is that good enough for you? Is that really what you want to do? If the answer is yes, then that's fantastic. But if it's not quite, then you really need to give that a lot of consideration, because it might end up being something that's very difficult down the line. So doing a PhD is long and it's expensive. So a very important thing to consider is whether you have the resources, the financial resources in place to do the entire PhD. It would be really a travesty if you got halfway through and then the funding dried up. It's important to know that you will have your funding in place for the whole duration. Some universities will fund PhD programs. Some people fund them themselves from personal finances. Other countries will fund PhDs. So research that and make sure that you have the resources to do all of the PhD, not just the first few years of it. The next is location. Where are you going to do your PhD? Is that the right place? Do you have support? Do you have access to family and friends? Is it going to be a nurturing environment for you? If the answer is no, again, you need to consider that, and you need to understand that location is one of the key things that might determine in the end the success or the failure of your PhD. Program requirements are important. You need to research what the requirements are for the specific PhD program that you're going to do and see whether you meet those requirements. They may be language requirements, they might be skills requirements, etc. You need to be doing a PhD that you are able to do in every single way. So make sure you research what's going to be needed of you in order to do this PhD, and to ask yourself, are you ready for that? Do you have everything in place? Will it work for you? Work-life balance is very important. You can get burned out in this long and arduous journey, so it's important to know what you will do during that PhD to ensure a very good and very healthy work-life balance. Is the place the right place? Will you have friends? Will you have support? Will you have family? Whatever it's going to be, are you ready for this program? And will you have a sufficiently good and strong work-life balance that means you can be sustained through the whole journey? This leads on naturally to mental health. And mental health is something that thankfully is talked about quite a lot now, because it's hugely important. A long, strenuous journey really needs a lot of support, and it needs a person that's prepared for that journey, and it also needs that person to understand that this can be very, very stressful, it can be very demanding, and as a consequence you need to not be afraid to come forward and say, you know what, my mental health is suffering a little bit, can I get some support here? And to, I think about this in advance of doing a PhD. How will you cope with the more difficult parts of the PhD program? Are you ready for that? Will there be support for your mental health? And are you sure that you're going to get through? Not everybody really is doing a PhD because afterwards they want a career in that area. Some people do PhDs because it's just a really interesting thing for them to do. It's in their bucket list. They really, really want it in their life. They want to say that they have done it. But for most people, it's a route to a career after the PhD. And this is something you need to consider. Will this particular PhD match to your career goals? Now, they might be within academia, they might be in industry, they might be in non-governmental organizations and places like this. But will this PhD satisfy for you that you can go on and flourish and thrive in your career of your choice? Is the PhD going to deliver that for you? That's something very important to consider. Lastly, will this PhD program give you the opportunity to broaden out your network, to meet people, to meet perhaps future employers, to meet collaborators? Will you have the opportunity to present your work, to go to conferences, to go to symposia, to go to workshops, to go to courses? How will your network look at the end of this PhD? And will it be strong enough? Is it what you want from that? It's a very, very important part of the PhD. Doing a PhD is one of the most fantastic things for many, many people, but you must approach it with an open mind. You must approach it with knowledge of what you're going to do, why you're going to do it, where you're going to do it, what the outcome is going to be, how it's going to relate to you for all of the rest of your life. And I feel you should consider these 10 things before doing a PhD. And if you can tick the box off all of them and say, you know something, I've actually covered all of these, I know how all of these works, then great. But I think it's very, very important to do these. And if after all of that, you decide to do a PhD, then from me to you, I wish you the very, very best of luck. And I hope it will be a huge, huge success.